Good morning, Dolphins fans. Welcome to another episode here of On the Fin Side with Kat and Paul. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, all of our social media outlets, as well as the finfanatic.com website and the Fansided Network. We haven't done a show here in 2 weeks now. We didn't do one last week because, quite frankly, we had nothing else to say. We talked about the head coaching candidates 2 weeks ago. Paul and I identified the top guys that we wanted, and for myself personally, there was a list of four for me at the time. It was Brian Daboll, Dan Quinn, Kellen Moore, and Mike McDaniel in no particular order. Mike McDaniel for me was actually at the top of the list. And, Paul's list did not look too different either. So, I was pleased initially, Paul, to hear yesterday that the Dolphins had scheduled a second round of interviews with Daboll, with Kellen Moore, and with Mike McDaniel for next week. Brian Daboll has been hired. That was the odds-on favorite to be the Dolphins head coach. He's been hired by the New York Giants. And naturally, Dolphins Twitter took a very level-headed approach to this. Nothing. No, everyone's freaking out, and some of that's warranted. I don't think it's warranted yet, though.
Yeah, no, and I do have a small bone to pick with all that. Like, it's the takes I hate are now. There's rumors that Daboll had been offered, but they already scheduled a second round of interviews next week. Which, whether Daboll was the favorite or not, that tells me that they're hopeful that Mike McDaniel's season will be done, and maybe Thomas Brown, because there are rumors that he's still in the running, even though we haven't heard anything. And what's making this hard is the fact that the Dolphins aren't announcing anything they do. So people are speculating. We all know what happens when people speculate and assume things. But the fact that people are, oh, Brian Daboll chose the Giants over us. Oh no, he hates Tua. Like, that's the stupidest take ever. He wasn't officially offered the job from anything any of us actually know. And he was officially offered the job from the Giants. And the Giants aren't going to offer the job and say, take a week, see if you like other people, and then come back to us. Like, they're going to basically say, look, here it is. Do you want this job? Here's the money. Do you want this? And that doesn't mean he hates Tua. That doesn't mean he hates the Dolphins. It doesn't mean we're a broken franchise. It sounds like when they talked to these guys the first time, they said exactly what we said 2 weeks ago, which was, we would like for you to keep the defensive staff intact. We think we're there. We don't need to rebuild the defense for somebody new. And we just need to fix the offense. And you're inheriting a defense that, when we ran the scheme properly, was one of the top units in the NFL.
Right. That's one thing to keep in mind, that Daboll, according to reports, was never obviously offered the job. In fact, he was only offered a second interview next week. And, people can have their problem with that or not. Part of me thinks too that if Daboll were convinced that Tua were a star, then maybe he waits around till next week, because he comes to Miami. He has all the salary cap room to work with. He's got a good defense already in place. That could be part of it too. But this is why I hate doing these shows, kind of, because so much is behind the door speculation. We're not talking about players. We're not talking about a game we just played. A lot of it is just kind of trying to make sense of rumors here. So, but one thing I will say, one thing I will throw it back to you on, Paul.
Yeah.
Is okay. I understand what you say about Daboll, and I don't disagree with you on that. My question is, what if the Dolphins get to next week and Mike McDaniel doesn't accept the job? Kellen Moore doesn't accept the job. Then what is your reaction going to be? Because I'm going to be freaking pissed if that's the case, and I'm going to be pointing the finger directly at Steve Ross for basically trying to put the cart before the horse again.
I'm not going to be fully there yet. I'm going to get worried at that point, because with them not announcing anything to anybody, all we have to go off of is rumors and speculation and hopes and dreams and wishes and clapping to make sure things happen. And, there are rumors out there that Bieniemy is involved in some of this search stuff. And we don't truly know if there is anybody else. There's three that we kind of hear, kind of know, kind of rumored, which those three are very likely. The guy that I can't remember if he was number one for me 2 weeks ago or not, but he's number one at the even before Daboll took the job with the Giants is Mike McDaniel. It's I would love, 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 love to see a scenario where Mike McDaniel comes in and brings in Kafka to be his coordinator. That would be a fun offense to watch if they were able to do things. The other thing I want to kick back over just real quick on the Daboll thing, it may have been intriguing for him to have two top 7 picks in the NFL draft coming up. Who knows?
Yeah, that's true. And yeah, the Giants pick 5th and 7th. Go back to what you said. Mike Kafka, is there a connection between Kafka and McDaniel?
McDaniel has coached across so many teams. I honestly haven't looked to fully see, but with them both being innovative offensive minds and Kafka being more of a passing guy and McDaniel being more of a run game guy, I think the two of them could complement each other very well if the two of them work together. This is literally just purely gestures and speculation, which I'll admit, even if the other folks that we're listening to out on Twitter won't.
Well, yeah, I mean, I have to think McDaniel's bringing his own guy in, though. I mean, that fits his. I mean, McDaniel, the reason he's my number one guy too is that he's able to bring this West Coast offense to Miami, and that to me fits Tua really well. And the player that I always compared Tua to the most was Jimmy Garoppolo, because he's not the biggest, he doesn't have the strongest arm. And I think Tua can actually be a better version of Jimmy Garoppolo as he continues to grow in this league. And so, yeah, I mean, to me, it's almost McDaniel or bust at this point, because not for me specifically, because I like Kellen more than a lot of other Dolphins fans do. You know, I understand the inexperience, but some of the things that are said about him, like, I mean, are we going to forget about the fact that this guy has been offensive coordinator for an offense that has led the league in yards 2 of the last 3 years? If you want to have
no matter who's broken on that offense.
Right. Well, I mean, and last year, okay, the offense didn't do well for the Cowboys. Last year, they had Andy Dalton at quarterback for most of the year. What are you going to do with that? And I mean, what are you going to ignore that he had the most yards in the league 2 of the last 3 years and pick a fight with that Dak Prescott call that put him out of the playoffs here, where Prescott, if he had slid a few yards earlier and handed the ball to the ref, they probably would have had a better shot than what they did. Mm-hmm. So, look, I understand some of the hesitations with Kellen Moore. He's a kind of a mousy looking dude. He's only been even a coach for 3 or 4 years. I get that, but he's somebody I like more than a lot of other Dolphins fans, I'll say.
Yeah, and I'm down with it. Some of the arguments I've seen against Kellen Moore were Kellen Moore was a crappy quarterback. You know, some of the best coaches are failed quarterbacks, or backup quarterbacks that have gotten into the league more, obviously with some physical talent, but more based on their smarts and their football IQ than really their pure physical ability. It's, you know, I've seen people make that argument that turn around and say, but we should hire Doug Peterson because he is great. Like, Doug Peterson was a fairly crappy backup quarterback, but he's a pretty damn good coach, even though he's not the guy I want down in Miami.
Yeah. No, I don't want him either. When it comes to Peterson, I tend to think that once his offensive staff left, things completely fell apart for him. I mean, they had a lot of talent with the Eagles when they won the Super Bowl that year, and Wentz goes down. Nick Foles has this magical postseason. But yeah, overall, I wouldn't feel great. I would just be ho-hum about Doug Peterson as the head coach. And I'm glad that they're not looking at him. And, you know, Eric Bieniemy, you know, maybe he comes back into the picture if the Dolphins strike out on their top 3 candidates, but I've heard nothing to that so far. Now, but my main thing is the Dolphins clearly identified their top 3 candidates, and that's the point in this. Clearly identified and brought them in for second round of interviews. You could say, well, you have some teams still in the postseason. They've already got an interview set up with somebody in the postseason, which is Mike McDaniel. So the hope is this weekend the Rams take down the 49ers, the Dolphins pick a few spots higher in the draft, and then Mike McDaniel becomes available, and hopefully they can wrap this up next week. And my understanding too is McDaniel is not really high up on the list for a lot of other teams. I mean, you take a look around the league, looks like the Raiders are going to get Josh McDaniels. The Jaguars probably are leaning heavily toward Byron Leftwich. Vikings are only going to bring in one coach for a second interview so far, and that's Todd Bowles. Texans bringing in one coach for a second interview, and that's Josh McCown. And then you've got the Saints, who are kind of late in the game here, who are going to decide, presumably between Dennis Allen, Brian Flores, and Aaron Glenn. So, I mean, I can't emphasize enough. I'm not upset even that the Dolphins didn't hire Brian Daboll or didn't land Brian Daboll, but they clearly identified their top three candidates. You better get one of them.
They have clearly identified their top three candidates to the best of our knowledge. There's all likelihood in the world that they have second interviews set up with other people that we don't know about. So that's the only caveat I would throw on top of that. I mean, it is very possible that they're doing interviews with Jim Caldwell. It's very possible they're doing interviews with Bieniemy. I really don't think anybody. I mean, I see a lot of folks in our chat mentioning Jim Harbaugh, and what I would say to that is it's pretty damning that despite some of these teams having the equivalent of no candidates to look at, no one's really looking at Harbaugh. Even the teams that are publicly like, hey, we talked to this guy, not one of them appears to be looking at Jim Harbaugh in any way, shape, or form.
No, he's not on anybody's list.
No.
I mean, there was some speculation at one time he'd be looking at the Raiders. But what you said there, Paul, though, my question would be, why would they not announce? Why would they announce that they've interviewed 7 coaches, but wouldn't announce they're interested in an 8th or a 9th?
Did they officially announce that, or was that the media saying that? Because the media has been speculating like crazy, but they haven't really been announcing officially anything.
Well, it's across 3-4 different places that they've interviewed these 7 candidates. So I don't think they're doing secret interviews with Eric Bieniemy or anything like that, but he could enter the picture down the road. We'll see. I mean, when I look at the Dolphins and the timeline of this, the fact that if they really wanted Daboll, I don't think they would have had second interview scheduled.
No, they would have backed the Brinks truck up.
Right. They would have backed up the Brinks truck for Brian Daboll and gone full court press after him. They didn't do that. They were somewhat interested. The Giants interviewed them first anyway. Then, they just had a lot more traction there. And also Brian Daboll, he's in Buffalo now. He gets to go he gets to stay in New York and play in a division that's one of the weakest in the NFL with 2 first-round picks. So there are good reasons why Daboll stayed there in New York and took the Giants job.
Well, and there's a lot of rumors too about being closer to family, et cetera, as well. I mean, it's so ridiculous when people take and use this to push forward the agenda that they would like to, or that some media members convince them of, oh, no coach wants to come here with Tua. Like, that's just not true. Like, and maybe some don't, but there's coaches that don't want to work with various players, and that's just, let's not use it as an excuse to push forward any agenda other than Daboll signed with the Giants because he wanted to, and he wasn't offered the job here.
And I have that same attitude right now, but it's based on whether or not the Dolphins were able to land one of the 2 other guys that they wanted, that they clearly identified. That's the reason they're doing second interviews with these guys. And yes, I agree with you that no, I don't think that there is no, I don't want to come in and work with 2 or anything like that specifically, but head coaches normally want to pick their quarterback. They normally want to pick their general manager. normally they want to pick their defensive coordinator and the defense that they want to run. So if Kellen Moore or hopefully Mike McDaniel are okay with that arrangement, it's all good. I mean, I'm excited. In fact, I wanted McDaniel over Dable, but if they don't, I look at the organizational structure and say, this is the reason you didn't get one of these two guys.
Yeah, and head coaches normally want to do all those things because they're inheriting a 3-win or less team. It's this is a different scenario. You're not inheriting a team that's utterly broken and needs to go through a rebuild process. You're not inheriting a team in cap hell. You're not inheriting a team that, you literally just have to do things all over the offense, defense, and special teams. That you're inheriting a team that won 9 games this past year. You're inheriting a team that had a top-level defense, has a young developing quarterback, and needs the offensive line fixed, needs a running back. About the only thing you need on defense this offseason truly is possibly to re-sign Agba and a couple of linebackers.
And that's just it, is that this should be a very attractive landing spot for a head coach if the organizational structure isn't a problem for them. And, like you said, you've got the Dolphins have the most cap room in the NFL next year. They have an extra first-round pick in 2023. So you can come in here, work with Tua for a year, and if he's not your guy, you get another quarterback the following year in the draft or in free agency.
Well, and you need a backup quarterback this year. You could literally draft one this year.
You could in the middle rounds. That's possible, or you could sign one. I mean, I look at. So you look at everything. You look at that the Dolphins have a defense that is already in place and ready to go for next year. I mean, you've re-signed Emmanuel Ogbah. You have very few holes on the defense, if any. You probably need to add another linebacker somewhere, but the Dolphins have the means to do that. They've got the cap room. They've got an extra first-round pick in 2023. You get to move down to Miami where the weather's nice. You have no state taxes. There is no reason that 3 of your clearly identified candidates should not want to take this job unless it is because of the stigma regarding the Dolphins and how they handled Brian Flores or didn't handle Brian Flores, and their head coach, their GM, and their defensive system already in place. That's what I'm saying. So I'm not mad right now, but I will be twice as mad next week if they don't land one of these guys.
I probably won't be mad and it's going to depend upon the scenarios, but I probably won't be mad for up to another 2 weeks or so, depending on the scenario. But it is a possibility. It's I just there's so much, no coach is going to come out and go, oh, well, I chose the Giants because the Dolphins organization, I didn't want this. It may not be about what he didn't want with Miami more than what he wanted with New York. And that could be true of other scenarios.
There's no proof of that he wasn't offered the job, or else the Dolphins would have gone after him directly, not waited till next week. The Giants wanted him more. He doesn't have to move far. He has 2 of the top 7 picks in the NFL draft this year. He gets to play in a big market. And he probably, maybe he likes Daniel Jones a lot too, and who's at least toolsy at this point. We'll see. So
one before we move on from Dable, the other thing too, and this is one of the reasons that I've grown even stronger on the liking McDaniel over Dable before the Giants news broke last night, is yes, Dable was a part of developing Josh Allen. But you look around that offense that he has up there and that he's had up there, and he looks like an innovative mind with Stephon Diggs and Cole Beasley and Josh Allen. And, you start running down that, and Dawson Knox, you start running down that offense, you're like, wow, cool. And then you look out at San Francisco, and They've developed Debo Samuel and used him creatively. They've got Kittle, who misses several games a year. They've got Jimmy G, who's, to me, a mediocre quarterback that also misses games every year. And they've literally had running backs coming in and out of the lineup. They found the way to utilize Elijah Mitchell immediately because of injuries. And you look down that roster and how many people on that offense missed time, and San Francisco barely missed a beat. And what McDaniel's been able to do out there consistently, he finds creative ways to utilize the talent on his team. Could you imagine McDaniel with Lynn Bowden back next year and Jalen Waddle, and if we can re-sign Mike Gesicki and somebody that's already experienced with RPO and option-based items, he could have a good time with this team, I think.
Yeah, I think bringing that West Coast offense style and being a run game coordinator, he has taken players like Jeff Wilson and Raheem Mostert and made them 5 yards a carry type of running backs. And I've said this since the Jimmy Johnson days. The Dolphins when it's 90 degrees in Miami and you have a team used to playing in that weather, you need to be able to run the ball. And we saw some of that in 2016 with Jay Ajayi. I mean, so yeah, we'll see. And also too, one thing people say about Mike McDaniel, I've heard is, well, I don't know if he's ready. Well, ready. I mean, this guy started working in the NFL in 2005. That was as a Broncos intern. I mean, that was what, 16 years ago? He was an intern in 2005 with the Broncos, offensive assistant for the Texans for 3 years, offensive assistant wide receivers coach for Washington for 3 years, wide receiver coach for the Browns, Falcons offensive assistant for 2 years, 49ers running game coordinator for 4 years, and 49ers offensive coordinator last year. How much more experience do you need? He's got way more experience than Sean McVay did when he took the Rams head coaching job.
Yeah, the good part is whoever doesn't know if he's ready, you don't have to know if he's ready. And if somebody hasn't been a head coach before that's had success, guess what? You're not going to know who they are and if they're ready or not until they get there. That's what the interview process is for.
Yeah, and I think that I really think McDaniel has been the apple of their eye from the first interview. McDaniel, personality-wise, seems to me to be a guy who you either like him or you don't, because he's got the quirky type of personality. He's a smart dude from Yale. You've got to have a pretty good instinct based on that first interview if he should be involved or not involved. And I really think that's the reason why everything was postponed. I feel like the Dolphins would have a new head coach right now if the 49ers didn't win that game last week. Mm-hmm. So it's all a matter of whether or not they can land one of those guys.
And if you watch McDaniel, there's some footage I saw of him working with the entire offensive staff out there in San Francisco. And the man commands the room. Like, he might look like a little dweeby nerd and a little hipster, like he should be ironically smoking a pipe, but he commands the room when he's there. And you watch some of his interviews, he's not shook when he walks up in front of the media. It's pretty cool to see. And there's he also strikes me as no BS without being disrespectful. There's a lot of different pieces I like, and he seems like he can work with just about anybody based on his coaching record.
I think a lot of people looked at who are down in McDaniel or say he's not ready, looked at his picture one time and said, no, not that nerd. And let me tell you this.
Just looks like a coach.
Right. Kyle Juszczyk and George Kittle absolutely are in love with this guy. Those are two of the toughest guys in the NFL. If he can win them over, I feel confident he can win over the Dolphins locker room. And let me tell you this, as supposedly the whole reason Brian Flores was fired was because he couldn't get along with people, or he was just a do it and shut up kind of guy. Wouldn't this team want to listen to somebody who is incredibly intelligent, who knows how to design things and get the most out of his players? it's not an exact science with these head coaches, but I think McDaniel's by far the best fit.
Yeah, and honestly, I can't see McDaniel is an intelligent guy, and I'm gonna refer to the article you sent me with Flaherty, and I can't see McDaniel going, Flaherty, get in here. Flaherty, former offensive line coach of the Dolphins, who didn't really get to coach the offensive line, and turned down multiple jobs to come down and be with Flores. We're gonna let you go. Oh, well, what happened? What do I need to fix? My gut just tells me it's time. Like 4 days in the camp. Like no reason, no nothing. Just my gut says it's time for you to get fired. Get out, buddy. Like that's ridiculous.
Well, he couldn't work with Patrick Graham either, even defensively. Couldn't work with Patrick Graham. He took a pay cut to go to the Giants for the same role. Couldn't work with Minka.
Who
couldn't work with Kyle Van Noy. Couldn't work with anyone on offense. So yeah, that's why I've come around to part of look. You could talk about discipline all day, but if at the end of the day you're looking behind you and nobody's following you, you're not a great leader. That's what it comes down to, and that's why Flores is out of here. I still would have liked Chris Greer out of here too.
There's a difference between discipline and just being a dick.
Supposedly that was the case, and I think it's going to be telling if so. He interviewed with the Saints, or at least has one scheduled, and also with the Texans. So wouldn't it be fascinating if Brian Flores does not get a head coaching job after all this hoopla surrounding him? And if he does get a head coaching job, keep an eye on if how many defensive assistants and offensive assistants follow him to his next job. So we'll see. And gosh, I am glad we're done with this show and we could talk about the Senior Bowl here next week and the draft moving forward, because this is so much behind the scenes stuff. He said, she said, but at the end of the day, I want Mike McDaniel to be the head coach of the Miami Dolphins.
I want Mike McDaniel, and just to throw a little bee in your bonnet, I want Araiza to come be our punter next year.
You want what?
Araiza, the punter. I want to draft the punter in the draft this year, Cat.
From San Diego State, I think he's from.
Yes, 80-plus yard punts, baby. Let's go. Left-footed punter. So much fun to watch.
I'm fine with that. I mean, hey, look, Evan McPherson, the Bengals drafted him in the 5th round this past year. I believe he's worth a 5th-round pick. I mean, you've got Jason Sanders, 7th-round pick. I think he'll be better next year. So we'll see. But that's going to do it for our look at the Dolphins' continuing head coaching search. I'm Brian Cat NFL on Twitter. Paul is fanatic_pick. Follow us on the finfanatic.com website as well as the Fansided Network. We're going to really start digging into draft talk next week after the Senior Bowl concludes. And we look forward to having a show as well when the Dolphins do announce their next head coach. And if it's not on the right side and it's not on the left side, it is on the fin side.